If you would be with me in prayer, please. This is the day that the Lord has made. Help us to feel the holiness of it, to sense your presence, God, around us. In the world you've created, in our friends and companions. Help us remember that our value comes as part of your creation and isn't measured in bushels or pounds. Help us immerse ourselves in your created world and love it as you do, and find our peace there. We ask these things through Christ who makes them possible. Is there special sharing today?
Yes, I do have special sharing. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, good. It's Linda, and I wanted to share. My mom, Joanne Allen, is actually on the line today and listening. And my grandmother, my mom's mom, Margaret Ludlow, has a book of poems that she had written throughout her years, and I wanted to share one of her poems and say thanks to Grandma and thanks to my mom. And this one is called God's Plan, and it was written by Grandma Ludlow in October of 1977. God's Plan. A little babe was born one day so many years ago. The wise men came from far and wide to worship where he lay. A shining star had led them, and a voice was heard to say, "This child is born, the Son of God, a king he'll be one day. He shall be known as Jesus, and he will walk the earth to teach us love for everyone and the reason for his birth. His life was short, he was betrayed, and death he had to face. But God the Father saved his Son and all the human race. So as you see, he is a king and rules the world his way. And sometime soon, the sins of man will all be swept away. All will hail the King of Kings and know he is the Master, and hope he chooses us to live with him in the hereafter." And again, thank you to my mom and thank you to my grandma.
Are there any joys or concerns or prayer requests to share with each other? If not, then we'll enter into a period of open worship, and I will speak when I feel it's the right time. This is from the 20th chapter of Exodus. Remember the Sabbath day and keep it holy. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work. But the seventh day is a Sabbath to the Lord your God. You shall not do any work. You, your son or your daughter, your male or female slave, your livestock, or the alien resident in your towns. For in 6 days the Lord made heaven and earth, the sea, and all that is in them, but rested the seventh day. Therefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and consecrated it. Many, many years ago now, I was helping a young couple prepare for marriage. It was the first time any couple contemplating marriage had ever asked for my help in becoming prepared. Therefore, I was not prepared to prepare them. So, of course, I went out and found a book. And in the book, which I found, I discovered an idea that I had never heard before and that took me completely by surprise. It was the idea that one of the purposes of marriage or partnership, one of the purposes of family life, is enjoyment, taking pleasure in each other's company. The idea that the joy of being together is the center around which family life should revolve. This was a completely new idea to me. Because even though in my family growing up, we did enjoy each other's company, we told stories and we laughed and we had adventures and such, I was very clearly taught in both word and deed that the purpose of our being together was work. The work that we shared as a family, taking care of the livestock, taking care of the garden, taking care of the household. This is what we were born into and what held us together. Beyond that, our purpose as a family was to uphold each of us as individuals in the work to which the world called us insofar as we were able. We drove each other places, carried things, read things over and corrected mistakes, gathered supplies, planted tomatoes, harvested beans. As we became adults, it became clear that work would never stop when we visited each other. Our visit was so that we could join the work that someone else continued to be engaged in. If my father had bought hay when we visited, we helped him stack the bales in the barn. If my sister was doing summer research, I went with her to the woods in the greenhouse and wrote notes as she observed the growth of acorns. I don't know how common it is for families to be so centered around the idea of working together. But I do believe that as adults, we have a strong tendency to pin our idea of our worth to our idea of our productivity. But that's not the traditional perspective of faith. The Judeo-Christian tradition says that human life is intrinsically valuable because God created human life and loves human life, and therefore life is valuable in it and of itself, whether or not it fulfills a purpose, whether or not it accomplishes or achieves something, whether it is ever a mechanism by which something else will happen. Life is just valuable, period. That's the traditional Jewish and Christian perspective. But it seems to me that whether or not we think of ourselves as Christians or people of faith, the functional view that we almost all use when we think about life's timeline is that life is life. It is what it is. It exists. It is the greatest part of our reality, but it is not valuable just because it is. It's valuable because of what we make of it or what we have the potential to make of it. This is why we almost universally respond as though the death of a 17-year-old girl is a greater loss than the death of a 90-year-old man, because we assume that the teenager still has a great deal of potential to make something of her life, whereas the old man has had his chance to make something of his life. Most of his potential to accomplish something in the world has been used up. And if he dies, the loss is not nearly as great. No matter what we say we believe, I think functionally for most of us, there is a point at which life begins to diminish in value. And that point is found somewhere in the balance between ability, capacity, functioning, productivity, pain, and suffering. But that point is not found in the Bible. In the Bible, every life and any life has intrinsic value. It's valuable because God made it. That idea is so pervasive that you can't go to just one place to find it stated. It's all through both the Hebrew scriptures and the New Testament. But if you did want to find a specific place in scripture where you could go and mull over that idea, you could start with the first handful of chapters of Genesis, the section which observant Jews call Bereshit, in the beginning. In the beginning, God saw what God had made, and it was good. Then God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. And God saw that the light was good. God called the dry land earth, and the waters that were gathered together he called seas, and God saw that it was good. The earth brought forth vegetation, plants yielding seed of every kind, and trees of every kind bearing fruit with the seed in it, and God saw that it was good. God made the wild animals of the earth of every kind, and the cattle of every kind, and everything that creeps upon the ground of every kind, and God saw that it was good. Until finally, the seventh day, when God ceases from doing all that good work and makes the day holy. Then eventually, when humans become a larger part of the picture and God makes a particular covenant with the children of Israel, God extends the Sabbath to men and women, children, even domestic animals. The seventh day is consecrated. It is for being, not for doing. This is the Sabbath as we find it in Exodus. Remember the Sabbath day and keep it holy. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, but the seventh day is a Sabbath to the Lord your God. You shall not do any work, you, your son or your daughter, your male or female slave, your livestock, or the alien resident in your towns. You would think that the commandment to keep a Sabbath, to refrain from work, would be one of the easy ones, but in my experience, this is not so. On and off for the past 20 years, I have tried rigorously for a month or 2 or 6 at a time to keep a somewhat strict Sabbath. Not on Sunday, of course, but a Sabbath day on which to do no work. And I'm not as exacting in the definition of work as an Orthodox Jew would be, or your average American Protestant in 1700. When I say no work, I still mean that I will turn electrical appliances on and off, drive the car, cook a hot meal, start a fire if necessary. But no chores, no washing the dishes or mopping the floor, mowing the lawn, running errands, answering email. And in all those attempts over all those years, I think I have managed to keep 24 hours of Sabbath less than a dozen times. It is well nigh impossible for an American human being of my age and general health not to arrange his day by what he wants to accomplish. The Sabbath, on the other hand, is arranged not by what we accomplish, but by what we observe. We could even say by what we enjoy. And those words, observe and enjoy, have this sense of perception about them. The Sabbath is arranged by what we see and hear and taste and touch. God made the Sabbath holy, and the Sabbath is holy not by what we do to make it holy, but by the attention we give to the holiness within it. Various observers of the Sabbath have gone this way and that in the role that prayer and worship and holy reading have within the Sabbath. Sometimes they make the Sabbath quite tedious by their insistence on specific performances of it. But for me, the crucial part of Sabbath is observation and perception. The holiness is already within the day, not the work or accomplishment of the day, but the day itself. To observe the Sabbath is to find the holiness that's already in the day, to wait and watch for God present in the day, to see God's presence not by anything we make, but simply because it's there, simply because it's the world God created, simply because God called the creation good. To observe the Sabbath is to commit oneself to doing nothing one day a week, but finding the goodness of the creation. To observe the Sabbath is to commit oneself to nothing but enjoyment, to notice, to experience gratitude for the natural world around us and for the social world, for our friends and companions, for our families. When it comes to keeping Sabbath, I think observation, enjoyment, and gratitude are connected and intertwined. Maybe the definition of enjoyment is just observation with gratitude. Maybe we can be more attentive to God's presence on the Sabbath because our perceptive sensitivities are heightened by our underlying sense of gratitude. And yet, with all the best intentions, it's darn near impossible to consistently come to a Sabbath one day in a week. I have Sabbath moments, a pause in the workday here and there where gratitude rises to the surface, and I become aware that I am standing on holy ground. But an entire day dedicated to that kind of pause, not so much. I mean, it's difficult enough just to stick to the idea of doing no work. But to sit and watch and look for goodness all day long, I have to wonder how many years and decades of Sabbaths most of us would need to get the hang of that. And yet, this is what I wonder. If I did know how to keep a Sabbath, would I be able to face the non-Sabbath days with less fear and more grace? If I knew that the value of life didn't come from what I could accomplish, but was simply there because life was God's, and if I had plenty of practice in sitting still and feeling the holiness in a day, would I be able to feel more peace in the days when I wasn't productive, about the days when my interaction with my coworkers brought me no joy? If I could get to the place where I understood that, yes, God does desire our works of love, but I also understood that perception alone satisfies the requirements of faithfulness. If I could get there, would I also be coming close to the point where my life would seem valuable to me no matter what my circumstances happen to be? Where my life would seem valuable to me in both sickness and health, wealth and poverty? Well, having never come to that place, I can't say it. I don't know. But I'm still going to keep working on keeping a Sabbath someday, somehow, because keeping a Sabbath seems to me like my very best hope for learning that I am always God's beloved, and that the meaning of my life is created by God and measured by God's creation and not by what I accomplish. Help us to become more perceptive, more attentive, to rely more deeply on our gratitude for the life that you have given us. For the joys that we've received. For the call you place in front of us. Help us to see and to hear the holiness in each day. And help us commit ourselves to extended periods of searching for your presence in everything around us. Remind us to enjoy the world that you have made. We ask these things through Christ who makes them possible. Amen.